Maybe it was never meant to be. Hello everyone, David here with my review of what is surely going to be probably the most talked about movie of the summer. And not necessarily in the best of ways. Yes, I'm here to finally talk about Fantastic Four. Now, I do need to apologize for the delay of this video. I usually post my reviews on the day of the release of the movie, but this one was slightly delayed because I had a certain, lady friend of mine who I am having the privilege of dating right now, but she wanted to see the movie with me, and I felt kind of bad because she also wanted to see Ant-Man. However, I saw Ant-Man without her because I wanted to get the review out on time. So I usually see movies Thursday night when they have that preview showing, and I was going to do that for Fantastic Four, but she wanted to see it, so I was like, okay, I'll hold off on it until Friday night to see the movie. And I was kind of worried because, oh man, this is where all the people are going to come to see the movie because it's Friday night. It's officially part of the weekend. There tends to be less people on Thursday night because that's still a work day, so they don't really go at that time, especially at 7 o'clock. They go straight home because they're tired from work or whatever. So I figured, oh man, Friday night, we get there, movies at 6:15, we get there at 6. I'm like, oh man, 15 minutes before the movie starts. I'm pretty sure the theater's going to be mostly packed and we're not going to find a good seat. We walk up to the lady, we ask, is it full? Are we going to be able to get a good seat? And she's like, oh yeah, you're going to get a good seat. There's hardly anybody in there. Never underestimate the power of word of mouth, which is definitely something that worked against the reboot of Fantastic Four. Directed by Josh Trank, who did Chronicle, 20th Century Fox tries to revitalize the property of Marvel's first family with this film here. One that everybody was talking about ever since those first details leaked out about Dr. Doom being a blogger, and then those set photos, and then the casting choices. But then we started to see photos and trailers, and that kind of gave us a little bit of optimism, myself included. But, man, just what happened? First of all, being that it's a reboot, the story kind of feels similar to the one that we've seen in previous iterations of Fantastic Four, mainly the 2005 film by Tim Story with Jessica Alba, Chris Evans, whatever, in which we have these four individuals who are transformed, this time through the means of a teleportation device that sends them to another dimension. And when they come back with these this otherworldly powers. However, one of them goes a little mad, so it's up to the wannabe Fantastic Four to stop him. So, where do I begin? Well, let's start off by saying that if you're going to reboot a superhero franchise in which you do want to give us an origin story, but you want to do it your own way, just do things fresh and new to kind of revitalize that property, then you gotta do it well. You gotta do it with its characters, you gotta do it with certain character beats, certain things that you twist in your own particular way. Even if the story is kind of similar to one that we've seen before, you need to try things a little bit differently. Which is one of the things that actually I did appreciate about this movie is the fact that instead of going up to space, like in the 2005 film, we go through the means of teleportation to another dimension. That, to me, for some strange reason, fit more with the ideal of the Fantastic Four, more so than going up to space. Especially when you're dealing with characters that aren't necessarily astronauts. You're dealing with teleportation. All you gotta do is go bloop, and then boop, you're in another place. No need to go through all this rigorous training and make things that much more unbelievable, despite the other flaws that this movie has. So with that, I feel compelled to say that Fantastic Four is not necessarily the biggest piece of shit you will ever watch on screen this entire year. I'm pretty sure there's something out there that has either been already released or is about to get released that's going to take the crown for worst movie of the year or one of the worst movies of the year. And for me personally, I don't perceive this to be a humongously, offensively terrible film. It's just a very gargantuan heartbreak. Because despite the things that get me more and more frustrated the more I think about it, there's some things here and there that actually I do enjoy about this movie that keeps me from wanting to denounce that meme that's going around. There's a photo going around showing the Rotten Tomatoes score of this movie versus the Rotten Tomatoes score of Dragon Ball Evolution, saying that when your movie has a lower score than Dragon Ball Evolution, you got yourself a problem. I don't believe that this is worse than Dragon Ball Evolution. No, definitely not. but that doesn't stop it from being a very heartbreaking experience considering the talent involved. Now, going back to one of the things that I really did enjoy about this movie is actually the opening 20-25 minutes or so of this movie that sets up the friendship between Ben and Reed as kids. First of all, the kids that they got to play these roles, they were really good. I liked them. Through subtle nuances, they were able to captivate what these characters as kids were about. And I actually saw, basically these first 20 minutes encompass what this movie could have been, the potential behind it, because you see the two of them interacting with one another. You see this guy who's not into science whatsoever, but he has that look in his eye like, hey, I think this guy's for real. I think this guy's really developing a teleporter. You know, it sounds interesting. Why not just, you know, go along with it? I mean, sure, I'm not into science, but it's better than just, you know, staying at home being abused by my brother, so I'm going to go ahead and join this guy. And that you see the bond, the friendship starting to form there, and I actually like that. Fast forward about maybe 20 years later, because now at this point these two guys are probably 30, and this is where the movie starts to crack a little bit, because then we have Miles Teller and Jamie Bell playing those respective roles, and the movie constantly tries to sell us that these guys have been best friends this whole time, and yet I don't feel it whatsoever. There's no chemistry amongst the two, and they don't sell me on that friendship that those original kids sold me on. Those kids did a better job than these two actors who I've seen in other stuff and be great in other stuff. We got Billy Elliot here, and then we got Miles Teller, who was fascinating in Whiplash. So, what happened? Was it the script? Was it the direction? All I know is that there was no feeling of there being a bond, being a friendship between the two of them, no matter whether it be at the beginning of this film when they're pre-Fantastic Four or even afterwards. And what makes it even sadder is that that virus, that is lack of chemistry, spreads throughout the rest of the team, even after becoming the Fantastic Four. The concept of the Fantastic Four is that they're supposed to be Marvel's first superhero family. The key term is family, and family, like one of the characters says in this movie, is caring for one another and learning to work with each other to perform great things. That is ultimately what the lessons that the Fantastic Four learn. And you do not feel like they're a family even by the end of the movie when all four of them are in a row ready to take on the main bad guy. You don't feel like they're a family. You don't feel like they learned anything from each other. And there's no chemistry amongst the cast, which is strange because when I heard the cast listing, I was like, this is perfect. Got Michael B. Jordan, who practically was Johnny Storm in Chronicle. Miles Teller, who I think can bring some gravitas to the role. Kate Mara, who I think was the worst out of everybody here. Not necessarily because of performance, but because she didn't really bring anything to Sue Storm. Sue Storm was like the blandest character. And then you got Jamie Bell, who just looked very uninteresting in the role, mainly because he had hardly any screen time to really emote and bring anything to the table. I mean, I'm not kidding. When Jamie Bell's on screen, and I mean Jamie Bell, not the thing, but Jamie Bell, the actor, he's in the movie for like, what, 10 minutes? 10-15 minutes total in amount of screen time, and then poof, back to CG Rock with his eyes implanted on his face, maybe a little bit of voice work, but even then with the voice work they tweak it to make it sound deeper, and maybe he might have done a little bit of motion capture, but that doesn't really matter because there's no chemistry, there's no personality to any of these characters, especially Michael B. Jordan, who I think is, I'm trying to say that this is the worst, but at the same time, Michael B. Jordan, like I said, I know the dude can be funny, I know that the dude can be a smart aleck, but at the same time make him like a lovable dickhead, and here, he's just way too serious, just like the rest of the movie, way too serious, way too dark. It's the Fantastic Four, look at this thing right here, literally, thing. You can't take this all too seriously. You need to have these characters be easygoing with one another so that they can like each other and therefore work with one another to become a team and become a family. You know how many times these four worked with each other, like to actually accomplish something throughout this entire movie? Once. In the climax. Just once. Because prior to that moment, all four of them are like here, there, and there. It's like the Fantastic Individuals, not the Fantastic Four. And then we have Doctor Doom, which was one of the key things that everybody was talking about prior to the release of the movie, where details were leaking out about him, who was going to play him, and then him becoming a vlogger, and he was going to be called Van Damme or something like that. First of all, a couple of those details were, I think, exaggerated, because first of all, his name is actually full-on Victor Von Doom, which I thought was actually a good choice. I was like, okay, you didn't, fuck around with his name too much. And they were commenting about him being a blogger and just feel, not really living up to that intimidating presence that was Doctor Doom in the comics and even that original 2005 movie. Quite frankly, there's like one scene of him in front of the computer playing like a video game while at the same time hacking certain things, seeming like a blogger. But then after that, they kind of sidetracked that detail and then let Toby Kebbell, who plays the character, and he was in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, he played Koba through motion capture. He honestly was one of the highlights of the film prior to his transformation into Doctor Doom. When he was just Victor, honestly, I felt like Toby Kebbell brought what was probably the most interesting character out of the entire cast, even more so than the Fantastic Four. And for a second there, I felt like he, along with those opening 25 minutes, also symbolized the movie, in which at the beginning there was a little bit of potential. I even liked him interacting with the team, building this thing to teleport into the other dimension. That entire little setup, I actually enjoyed. I like seeing the characters interact with one another. But sometimes they would focus too much on the experiment and not who were conducting the experiment, which is kind of ironic because even Toby Kebbell, Victor, has this little speech about how people remember who went up to the moon, but not who created the rocket that sent that person up to the moon. And that was a really interesting character beat that I really enjoyed seeing Toby Kebbell bring out of Victor, because there's scenes where sure he's a little bit narcissistic. He's a bit, he's a bit of a dick, essentially. There's something, kind of, aggressive and evil looking within him. But when you push that aside, he has the same passion and drive that Reed Richards has as a scientist. He loves science just as much. And I love that Toby Kebbell was able to bring that to the character. And there's even moments where he's somewhat bonding with the rest of the team. He's smiling along with them when an experiment goes right. He has a few drinks with them. And I was like, this could make a compelling villain. This is awesome, because this is what you want a villain to be. Someone that you can kind of get with and feel bad for when they turn evil, because you're like, oh, look what you could have done. And that would have been awesome, only for him to disappear for a large amount of time and then come back as Doctor Doom, who looked stupid as hell. I'm sorry. This is the design of him with the hood, and in this shot, he actually looks kind of cool. But in the movie, when you actually see him with lights around him, he looked like those robots, those alien robots from the 1950s that have those like really weird googly eyes, like like that's, oh my god. I felt like if you squeeze him hard enough, his eyes are gonna go boo-hoo. It's honestly, I did not like his look whatsoever. I mean, maybe in a different context or in a different type of movie, like a horror movie, he would have looked a little bit creepier. Which, I'll admit, his powers were kind of intimidating at first. When you first see them, you're like, oh shit, he just did that. And in a PG-13 movie as well. But then I started thinking about it, and that provided the next flaw in his character. His powers. What the hell were they? He just makes people's heads blow up and things move around, but without any proper explanation whatsoever. And the reason why you don't get any explanation, because immediately after he emerges as Doctor Doom, boom, the climax. The climax that I mentioned before, in which our heroes use their powers with each other to work together for the first and only time in the entire fucking movie, happens. And the best way that I can summarize this climax is that it feels like that first battle that our protagonist, or protagonists in this case, have with the main villain that first time. Like that first battle before fighting him either a second or third time in the actual climax of the movie. Because you know how these superhero movies tend to go. You got that first fight where the bad guy gets away, the good guy kind of wins, but the bad guy gets away. Then you got the second fight where I think the bad guy mostly wins, and the good guy has to kind of like retreat or gets captured by the bad guy or something like that. It varies from movie to movie. And then you got the final climax where they're kind of even powered, but the good guy comes out on top most of the time. Here, this felt like that first battle because it's over and done super quickly, and the way they concoct a plan in order to try to defeat the bad guy is just, I'm like, okay, where did you have the time to think about that? And there were instances where they took some liberties with some of these people's powers to the point where they're breathing in this planet. And I'm assuming it's because they were exposed to whatever they were exposed to in this dimension, but some things would have been just fine if they were just explained with one simple line. I mean, sure, it would have been exposition, but I would have taken that instead of just saying, "Oh, you already know. Let's just rush. Let's just get to the credits so we can have your money." And that's yet another problem with the movie, is the pacing. Because, like I said, we get to that climax super quick. We don't get a good feeling of these characters learning their powers, because I'm not joking. After they realize that they have powers, which I'll admit is one of the bright spots of this movie. It's a section that I actually felt for some of the characters, is when they barely wake up and they're like, "Why am I on fire?" or "Why am I a rock?" I actually felt for them, especially hearing them cry out like, "What's wrong with me? Where are my friends?" That's where I was like, okay, I feel the director coming back with passion. Like in those opening 20 minutes, I felt Josh Trank actually coming forward saying, "This is what I wanted." But then, we got a title card 1 year later, and then poof, hey, I know how to use my powers. I know how to switch them on and off. One of the things that fleshes these characters out is how they approach learning their powers. It's what we actually saw in Chronicle and what we completely don't see here. Guys, there's plenty of other things that I can talk about with this movie. Some mostly bad, but then some good. Some things that I actually looked at and I said, oh, that was actually kind of neat. Like, for example, Reed Richards here. He uses his powers in a way that I've never seen done before. And at first I was like, that looked kind of silly. But then I thought about it, I'm like, actually, you know, if you are able to manipulate every part of your body to stretch in a certain way, I would understand why he would actually do that. And I don't know why no other portrayal of the character has ever done this before, unless I'm missing something from the comics. Who knows? They probably have done that in the comics, and I'm like, oh wow, they finally did it in the movie. And I actually liked how these four were being used by the government. I mean, I know that sounds kind of wrong, but I like that angle that caused some drama amongst the team that I think could have been used as a catalyst to flesh these characters out. I'm not gonna give away too much, but let's just say that two of these characters were okay with working for the government because they felt with purpose, whereas the two others were against it. And they're like, no, I'm trying to fix us. This is only temporary, and even one of them kind of goes on the run, and I'm like, ooh, that would have been actually kind of interesting. Except we got to bring over that climax, so we got to wrap it up just as soon as it began. And I'm like, oh god. But I will say this: Josh Trank, the director, has come forward saying that it's Fox who's responsible for this cut of the movie. And I know it's kind of easy for directors to fall back on that trope of blaming the studio over their vision, because that wasn't their vision to begin with. I will say, however, that even though this is a specific case of he said, they said type of scenario, I wouldn't be fully surprised if that is in fact the case, because if you go back and watch those previous two trailers, there's a couple of shots in those trailers that actually show different footage, different things going on. And maybe that could imply that there is some kind of alternate cut out there that shows these characters being fleshed out more, being developed more, and me having to care about them more. And wouldn't mind so much when they try to fit in certain Easter eggs or certain references to the comic, especially some catchphrases, where they try to fit it in with the characters and it just didn't really work. Except for a couple. A couple I thought actually were kind of clever. But I do feel like something along the pipeline, Fox did in fact meddle with the movie. I don't know for certain, I could be completely wrong, but this wouldn't necessarily be the first time I hear a director talk shit about Fox. I mean, remember Fincher with Alien 3? Yeah, so, I feel like maybe Marvel needs to send over a business card over to Fox, give them their number for not only Marvel, but also for Netflix. And I think Fantastic Four is better suited for the small screen, like Daredevil. And I feel like that would, especially when you're dealing with four main characters here who can clash with one another and can develop drama over a serialized period of like 13 episodes per season. I think that would be better off for this superhero family, but just not the big screen, because every time they try, it has failed, and I feel like it's time to give it up. Fox, it's time to give it up. I'm sorry, but take a note from Sony and work out some kind of deal with Marvel, because that's the only way you can really redeem yourself. So, because of that, I feel compelled to give Fantastic Four, the reboot, a high, even though a high doesn't really matter in this case, but a high 5 out of 10. I kept trying to justify giving it a 6 out of 10, but a 6 out of 10 would be considered an okay movie. And this was not okay, because the more I thought about it, the more I thought about the disappointment of having all this talent, Michael B. Jordan, Miles Teller, Kate Mara, Jamie Bell, and the director Josh Trank, who did Chronicle, which was one of my favorite movies of that year. I think it was 2012. And then you got some other character actors in the supporting cast, like Tim Blake Nelson, and I can't remember his name, but he was in House of Cards, so it was kind of neat that they finally shared some screen time, which they didn't have in House of Cards with Kate Mara. Having all this talent behind the movie and then just completely wasting it is it leaves me with a broken heart, because when I heard the potential behind this movie, I was getting my hopes up just like everybody else, and that led to what was definitely one of the biggest disappointments of the year, and probably recent years, because man, this was their one shot. And they blew it! So let me know what you guys thought of Fantastic Four. If you have seen it, if you have not, would you be willing to watch it out of morbid curiosity? Kind of like how I was feeling when I was walking into the theater after having heard and seen some of the tweets that were put out there. Let me put it this way. This woman, her name is Roth Cornet. She used to work for IGN, and now I think she works for another movie website or entertainment website. She summarized this movie perfectly, and that is that this movie feels like that first act in a movie to what would be a preceding Act 2 and Act 3, which is what they were probably intending to have out of this reboot, like a second and third movie, which now seems unlikely, not only because of the way that this movie ends, because honestly it ends in a way where if it dies here and now, none will be the wiser, but on top of that, it's not only doing terribly critically, but it's also doing terribly commercially. Here's to hoping Netflix and Marvel and Fox work something out, because it's the only way that the Fantastic Four will be fantastic. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.